Hello, and welcome to my session about open source as a factor of trust. I'm Hendrik, I'm from Germany. I work at Hashgraph as a director of open source, and I'm working at the Hedera network, at the Hydro project, at the Linux Foundation. I'm part of the technical advisory committee of the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. And I'm on board of the Ebbers Foundation, so I do 100% open source work within foundations. And in the last time, I used that to create trustful systems. So what does it mean? Let's try to define what trust actually means. So let's take a common use case. Let's say we have two entities, could be persons, could be companies as an example, that want to work together. In our world today, that often means that they would like to exchange data. When two companies want to exchange data, there is always one problem. So who owns the data? Who is the owner of that data? Whereas, like in a classical world, the database that stores all this data. Is it at company A? Is it at company B? And that is a problem, right? Because whoever owns the data could modify the data, which in that case for company B could be a big problem if company A can just change any data where company B depends on. So one thing people tried is to externalize it, to externalize the trust to another company. But at that point, I mean, who controls then the company that now holds the data, right? That company can be really bad, it can haim the data, get paid by one of the companies, and so on. So all those things are not really a solution and can ruin your business if you use any data coming from a company that harms the data. So what we need to really create trust in those exchanges of data is decentralized trust. And I think I don't need to talk here with this audience about what decentralization means, how it works, and so on. But what is important from my point of view, and that is what I see when talking with developers who are not in this space, is a very important thing, is that in a decentralized network, the more nodes you have, the higher the trust is. When coming from classical systems, microservices, whatever, it's like the more nodes you have, the higher the performance is. That is not true for distributed ledgers. Here it's the count of the node has a direct impact on the trust of the network and not on the performance. And it's not only the node count, it's even the node distribution. Because even if you have 100 nodes, but all those nodes are owned by one company, by one person, by one identity, you do not have any benefit, right? So you need to have a network, a trustful network with many nodes distributed over different entities, maybe even over different countries of the world, and so on. And if you have such a distributed ledger, you can use that for two entities like companies to interact with the ledger, do transaction against it, exchange data. And if you want to go one step further, even be part of the ledger and be one of the entities, one of the nodes that creates the trust. And that is what we do today, I assume all of you in the room, doing something like that to create trustful transactions, trustful data sharing over the network, over the internet, however. So that is great, and that works in general. One big problem is that we can trust all that only as much as we can trust the software that is running the network. And when looking at trusting software, there are several challenges. So we have a supply chain. Every software has a supply chain. That can be compromised. We have vendor lock-ins. We have fragile government that can happen. Maybe parts of the software stack are not auditable. And maybe we have anonymous people who contribute code to that software. So all those challenges need somehow be solved to create a trustful software. How can we do that? The most important point from my point of view is open source. open source makes code first of all auditable. It allows anybody to have a look at the source code, to hire an expert, a security expert, whatever, and have a look at the code and do an audit about it. Is it secure? Is it correct? Is it bug-free? Does it do what I want? Having open source, and that is what happened in the past, I don't know, like in the last 10 or 20 years, created a lot of great standards that we have today, created compatibility between software, between applications. Open source is forkable, which means even if you do not agree in future with the people who are creating that open source software, you can fork it and create something new on the base of it. And with that, you avoid a vendor lock-in. So when I do a presentation in a room with not so much open source people or with people not so much aware of open source and who are a little bit skeptical of open source, I always have this slide. You know, a lot of people have an iPhone. And even nowadays in the iPhone, you can really have a look what open source components are used in an iPhone, which is, I mean, a lot of people trust that device. You have your trustful information on it, right? And that is based on a lot of open source. So some kind of it must be trustful. To create software that is trustful, it's not enough to create them in the open, which means having the source code open. You need a government model that defines how the source code evolves. And for that, foundations, open source foundations, are quite critical because they allow us to work together. They allow different entities to collaborate on creating open source, moving open source forward, create collaboration with different projects, maybe under the same foundation, and help small entities, individuals and or companies to become part of it, adopt the software, and maybe even find sponsors that allow an individual person to work on it, go to a conference or whatever. So in general, the open source foundations work like that. You have a project and total different entities who contribute to a project. Could be like a World Bank, could be a big IT enterprise, a small startup, or even an individual person, right? And while all those contribute to the same project under an open source foundation, or even in every project, it's like that what you can contribute, the resources, could be money, could be time you spend on the software, is heavily different, right? So a big bank can, throw endless money on a project. An IT enterprise maybe has a lot of people that can work full-time on the project. But an individual person maybe cannot spend money on the project, at least no meaningful money, and on the other hand, only has some time. Maybe that person does it in the free time, parallel to their or after their normal work, in the after hours. And while the resources that each entity can spend on the project is different when it comes to government and about making decisions, they all have the same rights because they are all like part of a working group, they all have a seat in a working group, whatever, which means in an open and transparent government within an open source foundation, I as an individual can, by working on the project, help to moving it forward, come into a position that my individual word has the same weight as, I don't know, the one from Google or Microsoft or whatever, right? And that is a big benefit because that allows us that it's not only those big companies who decide in what direction software we create goes, it's all of us at the end. And another important topic is supply chain security. So when we create software, we have a supply chain, like wherever we create anything, independent if it's software, food, or furniture. You always have a supply chain, and every supply chain has attack vectors. In software, we have a lot of attack vectors. You can, put bad code into the product. You can manipulate the build, and at the build time, change code that is used for the build. Or you can even manipulate the distribution. And while the source code is great, it was tested and built and everything is fine. When it goes up to a repository or when it's downloaded to a repository, you do a man in the middle and upload or download anything else. So a lot of attack vectors. That is something where Open Source Foundation helps a lot too. Especially if you are from Europe, we have the Cyber Resilience Act getting more and more near. And Open Source Foundations currently work on all the topics to help open source projects, not only open source projects of that foundation, but open source projects in general, to be more secure, to create best practices, to create resilient software. Two of the main, I would say, like working groups and activities here is the OpenSSF of the Linux Foundation and the Open Regulatory Compliance Working Group of the Eclipse Foundation. Both concentrate on secure supply chain and the Cyber Resilience Act. One project where I'm working on, where I see all those things today, is the Hiro project. So the Hiro project is a project at the Linux Foundation that is based off the Hedera network. So you might have heard about the Hedera network. And what Hedera did last year, it sponsored the full source code of the Hedera network to the Linux Foundation, which now makes the source code of the Hedera network a vendor-neutral and open source project. And with that, in those big foundations, it was really the first open source and totally vendor-neutral Ledger source code. And that is now used to run the Hedera network, which is this big public network. But next to that, everybody can even use that source code and create private or other public networks based on it. And with the move to the Linux Foundation and with the integration of all those best practices and so on from the Linux Foundation, the project has seen a huge, a lot of traffic, more and more getting higher amount of not only contributions, but even contributions coming from different people, because with this, hey, we are vendor neutral, everybody can use it now, you do not, code for any other companies that makes money out of it. We now have over 400 contributors of the project, and the interesting thing is with this move to the Linux Foundation, they are coming from over 50 companies. There was an announcement, sorry about that, like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago at, what was it, I found it, tokenterminal.com, that did a research about core development of blockchains, layer ones. And with that move, it's still called here Hedera. I would like to see Hiro here as a name, but it's named Hedera. This open source project under the Linux Foundation is now, after Ethereum for sure, the project with the second most development traction on it, which is really great. And that really happened with moving it in the open, moving it to vendor-neutral government and so on. And I believe that all those things help to make the software more resilient and more secure, and with that, more trustful, which is great. But there's still one problem left, which is kind of us, right? So, I mean, we now can do a lot regarding the supply chain, check all the things. We can have an open government and all that, but we can trust all of that only if we trust the people that really create the code. And that's quite a challenge, right? So how can I trust a digital person, a person maybe that I've never seen, that contribute code to my project on GitHub? Maybe that person is, acting in behalf of a bad company or something, or maybe it's not even a person, maybe it's an AI agent or anything. So we just don't know. And that was one of the projects we had, especially when working on critical software like the server components of a ledger or something like that. And 2 weeks ago, we announced something at the Global Digital Collaboration. That was a conference in Geneva. It was from the European Union and the UN, and it was in general about wallets and digital credentials. And together with the Linux Foundation, we created a proof of concept that is based on decentralization to even help us on that topic. Let me see if that is, oh yeah, it's working, great. So the idea of that is coming from the people who did decentralized identity under the W3C as a standard. And what we have here is we have like 2 wallets, right? So any wallets like we in the European Union will have in the future when end of next year, every European country needs to have a wallet by law. And what we can see in this wallet is both person have this personhood credential that is, as an example, made to the Linux Foundation by maybe a call, putting your passport in the camera, things like that, so that the Linux Foundation knows, oh yeah, that's a real person. And let's assume Bob and Alice met at a conference, right? And what they can do now is they can create contact by, in the wallet, just scanning the barcode of each other, and with that, sharing something that is like a business card, but with a specific use case. In that case, it's like, oh, this is the business card for this project, for this secure app, and this is my GitHub ID, and this is my GPG key. I do not share anything else with you, but I share those informations, and we both share those informations. And with that, Bob, as an example, can now, against a project, say, hey, I'm a real person, and Alice, who I met in person, can prove that I'm the developer of this and that GitHub ID with this and that GPG key, and that then can, for example, be used for pull request reviews, for creating releases of a software wherever. So by doing so, we can make clear that the person who does it is a real person. And that allows us, to not even have code that is trustful, but even trust the people who create it more. And the nice one on that concept is that we create trust over time, right? Because again, that's a decentralized system where people can connect with each other. It can be stored on any independent platform, like on a blockchain, which would make sense from my point of view, because I don't want to have those information stored on just one PC, and can be used in a lot of ways, like verifying contribution, really define, this is an AI bot, this is not an AI bot, do more secure votes, and so on. And with that, so what does trust mean when developing, distributed systems? From my point of view, transparency, right? Without transparency, we cannot be trustful. Decentralization, because that can be used to create trust between parties. Open source, make everything auditable, make us see what we use. Supply chain security, to use really at the end what we see in the code. Vendor neutrality, because I don't want to depend, on the next Google or Microsoft with my most important stuff. And it's the community at the end, with individuals and companies working together and collaborate and knowing who are those persons. And that is what we currently trying to do at the Hiro Ledger. So with that is trust for me too. Anyway, I think I'm already 2 minutes over. So if you have any other questions, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or just meet me here today. I hope you liked that pitch about how to create trustful software. Yeah, thank you.